Sponsored by Subcase. OnePlus has always framed itself as a disruptor, a challenger intent on rattling cages and ruffling feathers. And I don't think there's been a better example of that than this particular comparison, the OnePlus 13 versus Samsung's new S25 Ultra, where it sure looks like this is a lean flagship rival going after the stodgy, overpriced incumbent. The OnePlus 13 sells for $899 in the US, an incredibly competitive price which, at the time of talking, is $400 cheaper than the starting price for Samsung's latest Ultra. So let's dig into what is in fact a much closer contest than the numbers alone might suggest. Both of these are typical big old slabs of glass and metal, but the design language couldn't be more dissimilar between the S25 Ultra and OnePlus 13. OnePlus's phone is much more ergonomic, with subtle curves to the edges of its screen, soft chamfers on the aluminium frame, and similarly softened borders around the back, whether you go with frosted glass as I have or the fancy new vegan leather option in blue. Samsung's is much colder, almost industrial feeling, with sharper edges to its titanium frame and a completely flat display and rear glass panel. Personally, I prefer the aesthetics of the Galaxy S25 Ultra. I appreciate the angular look that's been with this series since it was the Galaxy Note. Although OnePlus's design language isn't my favorite with its offset camera bulge and weird sandstone glass wood combination finish here, you really can't argue with the ergonomics of this design. The OnePlus 13 is just much easier to hold onto and use. That's helped along by being ever so slightly smaller in terms of its footprint and a few grams lighter than the Ultra as well. Both phones sport excellent bright displays, with one key difference besides the lack of curved glass on the Samsung side. OnePlus goes all out with its higher peak brightness level of up to 4500 nits, whereas the S25 Ultra has its unique Corning Gorilla Armor 2 for unmatched reflection cancelling. As I've said many times before, I'm a huge fan of this anti-reflection glass, which only Samsung can offer right now. But OnePlus also has an exceptionally great display this year despite its lack of anti-reflection magic. So I feel like this one's kind of a wash. It's possible to have great outdoor visibility without Samsung's secret sauce, and OnePlus proves that. That being said, nothing quite matches the pitch blacks that you get from the Samsung panel even under bright daylight. It does look absolutely fantastic. And if you want to keep your S25 Ultra in pristine condition, protected from knocks, scrapes, and dirt, you want to check out the latest cases from this video's sponsor, Subcase. Subcase provides a range of options for the S25 series to suit any lifestyle, including the Unicorn Beetle grip for maximum rugged protection while still showing off your choice of S25 color. This case sports ultra shock absorbent TPU bumpers and is MagSafe compatible, boasting 1.81 kg force magnets. Plus, this ring holder here doubles as a kickstand in portrait or landscape orientation. Or go all out with the Unicorn Beetle Mag XT. This ultra-durable case features unbendable polycarbonate and a zinc alloy camera cover that can also double as a kickstand. The camera window has been tested over 30,000 times. Better still, you get MagSafe charger support without any disruption to the S Pen thanks to the built-in iron plate. That's not the case with most magnetic chargers for Samsung Ultra phones. The UB Grip and UB Mag XT are exclusive to the S25 Ultra, giving you the protection you need to keep your new device safe and looking fantastic. So check out these and other great cases from Subcase at the link in the description below. Thanks to Subcase for sponsoring. Now back to the video. On the inside, these two are based on the latest Snapdragon 8 Elite platform from Qualcomm, but with some key differences. Samsung has its special for Galaxy version of the chip with its slightly higher clocked GPU and prime cores. That makes a difference in benchmarks, as you can see here, especially in multi-core, but are you going to notice it in real-world use? Almost certainly not. It's mainly there just for the bragging rights, especially when you consider that the S25, like most phones, will throttle down during longer game or repeated benchmarking sessions. And in fact, the OnePlus 13 managed higher lowest loop scores than the S25 Ultra in some repeated benchmarks like 3D Mark's Steel Nomad Lite stress test, suggesting heavier throttling or maybe just inferior cooling in the S25. RAM and storage are much more meaningful spec points, and in this area both phones start with 12 gigs plus 256 in their base models. With OnePlus though, the step up to 512 comes with the added bonus of also bumping you up to 16 gigs of RAM, and that upgraded model is still $300 less than the base 12 plus 256 S25 Ultra. Not too shabby. Another spec advantage for OnePlus comes in the form of battery capacity and charging speeds. The 6000 mAh cell in the OnePlus 13 is 20% larger than the 5000 mAh rating Samsung has had for the past 5 years at this point. That's offset though by the fact that Samsung's 2025 flagship really punches above its weight in longevity. Even with a very run-of-the-mill battery, the S25 Ultra never ran out of juice even on busy travel days spent hopping between time zones. And with less intensive use, this was easily a multi-day phone. Charging speeds are where OnePlus really shines though, with faster wireless charging rates than Samsung can get over a cable, provided you stump up the cash for a compatible wireless VOOC charging pad. And if you do want to plug in using a 100-watt PD brick that's also an additional purchase, OnePlus offers some of the fastest charging rates on any device sold in the West. Just a quarter of an hour is enough to go from 0 to the 50% mark, and 15 minutes after that the phone will almost be fully charged. Though it's worth mentioning that the US version of this charger is capped at 80 watts, so your mileage may vary depending on where you live. Both of these companies are on top form when it comes to their latest smartphone software. One UI 7 represents the biggest visual overhaul for Galaxy phones in years. And the same can be said really for OnePlus's OxygenOS 13. A big focus of both brands has been on the fluidity of the overall UI, especially when it comes to animations and multitasking. There are plenty of small flourishes that just make everything you do in the UI feel more responsive. And both are highly customizable too, with both OnePlus and Samsung offering some pretty comprehensive theming capabilities that give you control over everything from animation styles to icon shapes and colors. Samsung does have the added bonus of Good Lock though, the official downloadable tweaking toolkit that offers countless interface tweaks for obsessively customizing not just the way the UI looks, but how the phone actually functions as well. Some of these are definitely wackier than others, which is kind of the point really, but there isn't really any equivalent to this on the OnePlus side. As we all know by now, it is practically against the law to launch a new smartphone in 2025 without some form of new AI trickery, and Samsung definitely has a more generous loadout of generative AI features, including things like AI call transcription and real-time voice translation, which is pretty impressive. The new AI Select mode also lets you intelligently pull out content from other apps and load them straight into this AI editor doohickey for additional generative tinkering. And you can do this with either images or text. It's a great match for Samsung's S Pen, which yes, still exists despite Samsung actually removing the Bluetooth wireless functionality from it in this generation. But although OnePlus isn't going quite as all out with AI as some other brands are, it does include the AI capabilities that I personally really care about, and that's in photography. 4K Detail Enhance is OnePlus's take on the AI Zoom Enhance feature we've seen from the likes of Google and Honor, inferring extra detail from zoomed in sections of your shots, and it works pretty well as you can see here. AI Reflection Eraser is another favorite of mine, supported by both OnePlus and Samsung. That's a lifesaver for those airplane window shots. Samsung does offer more AI trickery though, even in terms of just photo features. Its object removers seem to work a little better than OnePlus's in my experience, and the S25 Ultra also has all the AI features pioneered by its predecessor. Things like the ability to move objects around in a shot and fill the empty space left behind, or rotate photos and then fill in the edges. As someone who's generally not super enthusiastic about AI on phones, and who sees a lot of it as being pretty gimmicky, I'm not too disappointed by OnePlus's lighter touch here, but it does remain the case that Samsung offers more in terms of feature set, and that's true elsewhere in the software as well as with the extra AI bells and whistles. Dex is a great example of Samsung's extra feature depth, a full Android desktop mode running from the phone, casting to your monitor, including a trackpad via the touchscreen. And it's also possible to stream this experience to displays wirelessly, so you don't need to worry about carrying the right combination of cables. Nevertheless, comparing any other Android UI to One UI is bound to make it seem lacking in certain features. The bottom line for me is that what OxygenOS offers does enough. It has all the features you'll actually use day to day with sharp visuals and smooth animations, and enough extra goodies like AI photo editing and windowed multitasking to make it a powerful productivity device. On the Samsung side though, I do appreciate the greater diversity of widgets and some of the more advanced customization options like lock screen clock styles and theme park for completely overhauling the phone's look and feel, and the mad scientist level of customization that you can do with something like Good Lock. It's feature rich, but not at the expense of polish. And Samsung also has an edge in software support lifespan, with the promised 7 years of Android OTAs bring it all the way up to the beginning of 2032. With OnePlus you get 4 years, decent but not outstanding, and a further 2 years of security patches after that. Samsung's unique quad camera system is one of the big reasons many people go for an Ultra phone, so it's been surprising for me to see how competitive OnePlus is against its much more expensive rival. Samsung of course has an extra camera in the form of that old 3x telephoto, but it doesn't really get much benefit from it because the sensor is so tiny. For decent quality zoom on the S25 Ultra, you'll mainly rely on the superior 5x with its larger sensor. OnePlus's 3x periscope has a larger 1.95-inch sensor behind a brighter f/2.6 lens, and while that 3x optical means you've got less leeway for longer zoomed shots, you'll get stronger performance in the vital 3 to 5x range out of the OnePlus camera. Jumping into some sample photos, we can first see some pretty typical color differences, with Samsung producing a cooler and less contrasty image in daylight conditions. I also noticed a touch more fine detail being captured in some of these OnePlus images taken with both the wide and ultra-wide camera in daylight, though the trade-off was often a slightly more processed look in shots from the OnePlus 13, with more of a visible sharpening effect and even a little bit of HDR haloing in places, as you can see here. OnePlus's camera also tended towards higher exposure levels in scenes with a lot of backlighting or anywhere where there's a lot of contrast between very bright and very dark areas. That lends to a look that's ever so slightly more artificial feeling as opposed to Samsung's more natural, more muted output. With the ultra-wide, the field of view is identical at 120 degrees for both, and both are highly capable and a lot of fun to use. In addition to the processing differences I already mentioned, I felt like OnePlus, with its more aggressive processing, did a better job at cleaning up areas around the edge of the frame on a few occasions, and this trend actually carried over to a few shots with the wide lens in some places as well. Telephoto obviously is where things start to get pretty interesting. The S25 Ultra's 10 megapixel 3x, which has been around since the S21 Ultra, is roundly beaten by OnePlus across the board. Samsung's images aren't terrible by any means, but side by side you can definitely tell OnePlus has the advantage of a larger sensor. At 5x, Samsung technically has the advantage, but OnePlus also has a 50 megapixel resolution and thus plenty of detail to drill down into at a 5x zoom level. So at 5x, these two are pretty much on even footing. The only thing I noticed was that the OnePlus telephoto was a bit more susceptible to hand motion at those longer zoom levels. And even at 10x zoom, there's not a whole lot in it. Maybe slightly more fine detail in the Samsung shot, but you're really not going to notice much of a difference here unless you're at 20 or above. Selfie-wise, you'll notice a slightly wider field of view on OnePlus's camera, though the smaller size of Samsung's selfie sensor didn't seem to adversely affect its performance in lower light conditions. In low light photography more generally, OnePlus was a bit more aggressive when it came to activating night mode across all of its cameras, and the differences in the way these two night modes work results in brighter but often flatter looking images from the OnePlus camera, whereas the S25 Ultra's shots retained a more natural bokeh effect. In shots like this, I'd say Samsung probably is a closer match to what your eye sees, but perhaps the OnePlus shot is the more attractive looking photo. Obviously telephoto at 3x is a completely unfair fight just because of OnePlus's optical advantage there, and moving into 5x, the situation is much the same as it was in daylight, rarely a clear winner unless you go pixel peeping at 10x or above. The more noticeable difference here just has to do with the look and feel of the shot. Video though shows that OnePlus still has parts where some improvement is needed. This is one area where Samsung has been working hard to improve in recent years, and it shows. I found Samsung's stabilization to be slightly more reliable than OnePlus's in moving shots, particularly with the ultra-wide, and video quality tended to drop more precipitously across the board as light levels decreased on the OnePlus cameras. Not to say nighttime video is terrible, but you can see Samsung does a better job in conditions like this. So let's take a look at some more video comparisons before we reveal our winner in this matchup. So if you were to ask me to pick one of these phones at their current price to use for the next year or two, it's a tough call given the gulf in pricing, but I think I'd probably keep the extra $400 and opt for the OnePlus 13. It's not an easy decision, and I'd definitely be missing out on some of Samsung's more exotic features, things like DeX, the programmable modes and routines capability, and the more generous loadout of AI photo editing options. But the OnePlus 13 software, and really just the phone in general, does enough and does it extremely well. Performance is on par with Samsung, and OnePlus actually pulls ahead in some benchmarks. Its design is more hand and pocket friendly, battery life is incredible, and fast charging, especially over a wire, is a valuable convenience even in an era of multi-day phone battery life. Meanwhile, the camera really doesn't make me feel like I'm missing out on all that much compared to the S25 Ultra. Longer telephoto zoom is the only real thing you can point to, but even then, OnePlus's larger 3x telephoto picks up enough of the slack and is good enough in that critical 3 to 6 times range where most people are going to be shooting anyway. All of this for $899 is an incredible deal that really brings the heat to more expensive Android flagships like the S25 Ultra, which ultimately, for me, is why OnePlus takes the win in this matchup. But that's just my opinion. Hit the comments, let me know which would you pick out of this pair, especially if you've already gone ahead and chosen either the S25 Ultra or the OnePlus 13. Stick around and subscribe for more comparisons, but for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.